Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Andrew Doyle, who is an author and a cultural critic and an anchor at the GBN news channel that can be found online and I presume streamed offline too. I don't know though. But anyway, so he wrote a book called New Puritans that is debuting or coming out on the 8th of September and the 14th of September. The 8th is in Great Britain and the 14th is in the United States of America. It is a book exploring in detail the social justice ideology or critical social justice or wokeness or whatever you want to call it. He has a long track record of investigating that and commenting and criticizing that. And this book takes all of that which he learned and concretizes it and distills it into a very powerful volume that I took some issue with and had him on my channel to get my issues off my chest. We have a great conversation. This is our fourth time speaking. Great fellow. Wonderful to have him on. I think that's enough of me talking. I'm going to get out of the way. Here is Andrew Doyle.
So tell me when you want to start and I will get my game face on.
Oh, really? Okay. Are you need some eyeshadow, a little bit of Bowie?
Someone said to me my eyes are very sunk into my head, and so I should wear makeup under the eyes.
Oh.
And this came from a woman at work. I now have a job.
The media job where you talk on a camera. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So I thought I'd take that seriously because she knows what she's talking about, but I haven't put any on now. But I can if you think I should.
No, the lighting's excellent. We can't see.
You can't see how deep set my eyes are.
How sunken your features are.
Sunken
and gaunt.
Monstrous. Yeah. Huh. All right, ask away, Benjamin.
Okay. I didn't get to see the cover of your book, The New Puritans. Do you have it so I can see it? How you guys Oh, okay. There we go. Cool. All right. Red and black.
That's how it looks.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. It's pretty hard hitting, and pretty good. One little anecdote. I went to this place called the Evergreen State College, which in 2017 experienced its own kind of Salem witch trials.
Yeah, I saw the footage.
Yeah, you saw the footage, and the parallels are pretty clear, especially how you reframe what you call the new Puritanism and critical social justice. Anyway, so I was there in 2015. I almost took a course called the New Puritans, but some things happened and I could only do independent work while they studied Milton and that era. And also the two professors who designed that course were speaking about this new Puritanism that they saw on the rise.
Even then, even on the Evergreen campus.
Yeah, in 2015. It was really interesting. And both of those professors ended up, going along with the new Puritanism in the end.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? That they themselves, even though they were well versed in it historically, had to succumm.
No, they had to put the BLM poster up and write the little denunciations of Brett Weinstein when he proved himself to be a witch.
That's amazing. Yeah. That is amazing. Well, as you know, I mean, I've started and ended the book with Salem. I just think Salem is such a fascinating period. I mean, I used to teach The Crucible, the Arthur Miller play, which is obviously the dramatization of what happened in Salem. And I think one of the reasons it's so fascinating, though, is that it was such a short-lived thing. It was only a year towards the end of the 17th century. It came and went, and it was not typical of these people. The Puritans weren't witch hunters. That this wasn't something they did, and everyone afterwards said they got it wrong, right? So this was a moment where this community gets caught up in this major hysteria, and they all believe it. They all believe that the girls are seeing witches everywhere and that people are possessed. But what's most interesting and most relevant, I think, to what we're going through is that there were obviously people within that community who were skeptical, who didn't believe in the girls' testimonies. And everyone who made that clear was themselves accused. So in order to, people like Rebecca Nurse, who was hanged, wasn't prepared to say that she was in league with the devil. And, and those who did confess tended not to be executed because the Puritans were into mercy. Mercy was one of their things. So the judges were incredibly lenient. So we can be fairly sure that the ones that were hanged were very devout Christians. But I think what's really interesting is the people who knew and went along with it. That sort of Because one of the reasons why Arthur Miller said he wrote The Crucible is because he was terrified by the conformity, the people who kept silent for self-preservation. And that, I think, is what's going on now. People won't speak out about what's going on, about this new ideology, because they see that whenever anyone prominent on Twitter says that, there are two sexes, they get absolutely obliterated, and you can lose your job for standing up to this stuff, and you can have your reputation trashed. So many people, I think most people can see it's hysterical, but they won't speak out. And I think that's why it's a good parallel.
Yeah, we both been looking at this for, I guess, for me, probably 8 or 9 years, because I was at Evergreen, so I was watching it rise. But it seems like kind of old hat stuff to me. You wrote this to the general audience, and it's a good marker to kind of give people a little bit more footing to stand on, because, like you say, a lot of people aren't speaking up, maybe because they don't have certainty that they can survive, get through it. But do you think it's going to perpetuate? Do you think it's just going to go on and on and on and on? Because it doesn't seem inherently stable.
Well, part of the problem is, you and I are both so familiar with this stuff, and we've been living and breathing it for all these years. Most people aren't familiar with what's going on. They don't understand. And they're confused because there's this thing called the woke movement, whatever we want to call it. I call it the critical social justice ideology, but various people have various names for it. But they see that it's various branches, and all of their various branches are to do with race, gender, or sexuality, identity. And they can see that these people are using progressive language. They talk about social justice. They talk about anti-racism. They talk about equity. And so people think, okay, that's great. Well, I'm against racism. I'm for equality. I'm for justice. So we'll cheer them on. And what they don't realize is all of that language is completely misleading. It's progressive sounding terms to mask regressive ideas, as you know all too well. And so I think people are coerced into going along with a movement that it operates in opposition to their interests. So that's why I wrote the book, because I think it's really important to make this accessible to people who haven't thought about it all that much. Things have changed so much since we last spoke, though. Because I think we spoke during the pandemic, and did we speak before or after the George Floyd event? I can't remember. Man. Because I think it was before then.
I think it might have been before.
And I think since then, when we first spoke, and I raised issues about this, many people would say that I was exaggerating, that it's just a problem of a few overzealous students on campus, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But now evidence of what I've been saying is everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. And so it feels a good time to write this book now, because no one's going to say, well, you're just imagining this. This is a false, fabricated culture war. It's like, no, you can see all of this is happening, and more people are being told to add pronouns to their emails at work, or to announce their pronouns in meetings at work. And although that seems like a small trivial thing, it's not. It's a declaration of fealty to this new religion, and we wouldn't tolerate it if you had to proclaim your faith in Christ before the start of every meeting. So this stuff is now evident. The extent to which it is damaging our society, making us more divided, making society more racist, more homophobic, all of the things that it purports to heal. It's all becoming clear. The evidence is in. I've given so many examples in the book and sourced them all, so people can check it. This is the point. It's like, if you don't know what's going on, and hopefully if you read the book, you'll know what's happening, and also how to push back against it. And I think maybe what the major way, this is one of the reasons I talk about Salem, is because I'm trying to make it comprehensible. And I think everyone can understand, looking at what happened in Salem, that there was a period where there was a mass hysteria, people died, there were serious consequences, but it was perpetuated by the elites. If at any point the magistrates and the ministers had said to the girls, no, you're not telling the truth, this is not real. But instead they said, what you're saying must be true because you're experiencing it. This is your lived experience. Now, they didn't use the phrase, they used the phrase spectral evidence, but it maps on exactly to what we call lived experience today, which is, it's my truth and therefore it's true. And I don't need any other evidence other than my perception. And it's the same thing. It's just happened again. Now, of course, we're not at risk of being hanged if we don't accept someone else's lived experience, but we can be fired. We can lose basically everything. So the stakes are still pretty high. but like I say, the elites, I mean, and today it's the people in power, it's the people in the major institutions, the corporate institutions, political institutions, media class, managerial class, the NHS, the army, the police. All of these people are dominated by this ideology, and they're the ones saying, yes, the witches are real. And you've got to go along, you've got to say the language we want you to say, you've got to do the things we want you to do. So the parallels are clear. But one thing, I don't know, I mean, you've studied Salem, you know what happened. I've read a lot about Salem in order to write this book. And the more I read about it, what I hadn't realized before is how clear it is that so many of the elites didn't believe it. There were so many examples where the girls would cry witch on someone, a prominent dignitary, someone in the community who mattered. And the minister would say, no, you're mistaken. That can't be. No, you're mistaken about that. Move on to the next thing. There was even one moment where one of the girls pulled out a little shard of a knife, a broken off bit of a blade, and she, with some blood, and she said, oh, that witch has just sent out a spirit and stabbed me with this. And she held up this blade. And a man who was in the courtroom said, that came off my knife yesterday, and you were there. You picked it up. So, and the magistrate just said, let's move on then. Rather than saying, well, that's evidence that the girl is lying, they just said, let's move on.
Okay.
So that's really interesting, I think. And I think it will take, in this country, we have a situation where our major politicians, if they're ever asked what is a woman, they don't know what to do. And you can see the fear in their eyes, and they start saying, oh, well, it's complicated, and, and stammering, and, but if they just had the bravery to say a woman is an adult human female, then maybe things would be okay. But it's a top-down problem, isn't it? When the elites go along with it, it's hard to battle.
One wonders if in Salem and in modern day West, the elites who are going along with it are going along with it because it is expedient somehow. It does allow them to operate.
Well, I mean, it's a good way to maintain the status quo, isn't it? It's a good way to show that you're doing something virtuous without really doing all that much. You just put a Black Lives Matter symbol on your Twitter, or a rainbow flag on your email or whatever, and job done. You're on the right side of history all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Maybe it is to do with that. I mean, look, I don't like speculating about people's motives, but I do think the way out of this will be people need to be braver, and people need to stand up. And it'll be like Salem. There was a tipping point where too many people were saying, we don't believe the girls anymore. And then it just stopped. I mean, it pretty much stopped overnight. So that could be our way out. We just need to stand up against it.
The question then being, are liberal values themselves strong enough? Do they not lead to this?
They've got an inherent weakness, haven't they? Because if you are a liberal, then you're very tolerant by nature, and you are open to dissent, and you believe in the marketplace of ideas, and they don't believe in any of those things. They believe in censorship and shutting people down. So they have the advantage of ruthlessness. But I don't think there's a better system. And I think all of the progress that's been made since the civil rights luminaries of the 1960s, all of that has come about through the liberal project. And if we jettison that, heaven knows where we'll end up, but it won't be pretty.
Well, there is a contradiction or a tension that runs through your book where you're looking at this movement, this illiberal movement, this woke movement, and they are deriding you as a liberal, but there's just this subtle derision of the right or the conservative or the...
what, in my book?
Yeah, just a subtle bit where conservative is... construed as nostalgic for the past, or in one part you said no enlightened individual would suggest that racism, homophobia, and sexism should not be tackled.
Yes.
So just
that's not a dig at conservatism, because I think that's a view that conservatives would agree with.
Well, it's a question: should racism, homophobia, and sexism be constantly tackled? Should we be obsessing about that? Should we be rooting that out? Is that not what the woke are doing, to always be tackling these problems?
Two things. So one thing is, I don't say that conservatism is a nostalgia for the past. I say the opposite. I say conservatism is misconstrued as that.
Okay.
But in terms of this question of should we be tackling it, yes, we should be tackling it when it arises, right? Not searching for it in order to tackle it, right? So it's the difference between a police force that solves crimes when people report crimes, or a police force that trawls for victims, as our police force often does, and they tweet out saying, if you've been the subject of a hate crime, contact us now, please. And because no one knows what a hate crime means, suddenly they get all these phone calls from people, and suddenly the hate crime stats go up, and everyone screams about how hate crime is on the rise when it absolutely isn't. So, no, I think the Liberal Project would say, I mean, come on, Ben, if you saw someone screaming racist slurs at a person on the street, you would say something about it. You would stand up and say, that's not right. Okay. But that's the right approach, I feel. But what you're not going to do is assume that racism underpins every single human interaction and try and root it out through these philosophical theoretical means, which is what the woke do. So I don't think it's anti-conservative to say that we should stand up against injustice where, as and when we see it.
Okay. All right. It's just, I just want to understand what liberal values are then. And if there's a tension between that and conservative values, or... Well,
you see, you find it difficult because you're American.
Yeah.
And so in America, liberal means something very different. I think you use liberal as a synonym for left wing often.
No, I understand, but I would just like to map it out. I understand the philosophical underpinnings of liberalism, but I want to understand what you think those are. They aren't explicitly listed in the book.
Yeah, it's to do with freedom. It's to do with freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, individual autonomy. The standard liberal values that have sustained our societies for years, that, human rights, basic human rights, that you're allowed to live your life so long as it doesn't encroach on the rights of others. This is the liberal system.
That's an absence of a system, though. That's to each his own. Can a society be cohesive if everybody's just doing their own thing and there's no?
It'll never be perfect, will it? But you'll always get conflicts and you'll always get difficulties. And one of the flaws that the woke make is that they assume because we haven't reached the desired utopia, because there is still, there are still problems inside, that means liberalism has failed. But liberalism never claims to have to be able to have a perfect society, because we are imperfectible creatures, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's a system at all. It's principles, isn't it? It's not an ideology. I mean, you could put it down to just basic human consideration and empathy, couldn't you? I think it's just living your life as a decent human being. I don't consider that an ideological stance.
Well, there has to be an ideology that imprints that decency in a population. There has to be some sort of moral code. You give voice to it, and how you propose political correctness could be a good thing, where there's a consensus, not a mob, but still crowdsourcing a morality. There has to be liberalism. Yeah. Came out of Christianity. It was fostered within Christianity and operated by people who had assumed the moral truths, or assumed as true the moral effects of Christian doctrine.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'm not a cultural relativist, and I do think certain ethical systems are better than other ethical systems. I do know that ethics change over time depending on cultures and depending on time frame. That's absolutely true. But I think some cultures are better than others, and I think the culture that believes in empathy, forgiveness, mercy, compassion, supporting each other rather than hurting each other, these are good, positive values. Okay. And we can debate all day long about where these things derive, whether they are innate, whether they come from the Judeo-Christian tradition, whatever. But those are the ways in which we socialize our children, and I see that as being a good thing. And what do we want to replace it with? This sort of mass detective work that the woke want us to do, where certain people, the clergy, let's call them, are uniquely placed to be able to detect the sinners and the sins which are hidden in these power structures and networks that no one else can see, and we just have to take them on trust. I don't think that's good. I don't think dividing us up into our various demographic groups and racial segregation, I don't think that's a good thing. The end point of woke philosophy is racial segregation, and I think that's bad. Right? So, and I don't think really many people would disagree with me on that. I don't think you would.
I don't, but I don't see how the woke aren't operating within the same moral framework, just turned up to 11 of empathy and working, getting along and lifting up the marginalized. It's just a particularly advanced case of just those values. It seems like empathy in and of itself is not enough for an entire society. There has to be excellence and discrimination of ability in the very least.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But that's something you've hit on there is exactly right, is that the intentions are pretty much the same on both sides of this argument. Everyone wants a more just society. Everyone wants a more equal society. Everyone wants that. And it's just that their means by which they feel they might achieve that is actually working against their aims. So it's more a question of method, isn't it?
Mm. You also appeal to rational argument, and it seems like you can't, when rational debate is no longer needed, when common sense is so obscured, when we're living in upside down world, we can't really appeal to that argument.
Well, no, there's a way. You can, I absolutely have struggled with this as well. It's about being selective about who you attempt to talk to and engage with.
Yeah.
So, someone who's got an anime avatar on Twitter who's screaming abuse at you and says you are worse than Hitler and says that they know what's going on in your mind, they can read your private thoughts. What's the point? That's like having a conversation with the village idiot. What are you going to achieve there? So I would say just don't talk to that person, just block that person. Reserve your energies for people who are still capable of reasonable discussion. And this is why I think that very useful phrase about describing this movement is the counter-enlightenment, is that actually those enlightenment values, I mean, if you want to try and find a source for the way in which we approach the world, the values of the Enlightenment, the idea of reason, rationality, of evidence-led epistemology, of the primacy of truth, those things are pretty good foundations for a cohesive society. And this movement, one of the reasons why I think the woke movement is such a threat, is that it rejects the notion of truth in favor of different ways of knowing in individual truths.
Doesn't that point to a lack in purely truth-based epistemology? I mean, did not the Romantic period follow the Enlightenment? Weren't people yearning for something more than just epistemology and philosophy and rationalism?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and of course, but I think that's to misunderstand the core tenets of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment isn't a movement that rejects the arts or rejects the numinous necessarily, or rejects the human experience in favor of this kind of mechanical, scientific approach. We're not all robots. You can completely have a compatible situation where you depend upon evidence in order to advance towards the truth, and you can still have great art. You can still have the mystery of being alive, of the human condition. All of those things can be part of that.
Yeah.
And I don't see them as at all being in conflict.
Well, maybe a good example, because you studied English, you studied writing, you studied art. You bring up one of your favorite professors. I don't know if you studied under them directly, who wrote like 2 volumes on, was it John Donne or?
John Donne. Yeah. So that was Robin Robbins. Yeah. He was my supervisor. So I worked very closely with him.
So in his 2-volume work on John Donne, he followed every single allusion, right? He tried to tease apart every single possible inference in the poems. Yeah. How do we bridge evidence with human feeling? And I wonder, because how critical social justice took over was through epistemology, was through interpretation. Hermeneutics actually was through the English departments, and then through the humanities, and then it developed.
Yes, isn't that weird? And then it spread from humanities to the sciences, which is something I don't think anyone saw coming.
No, they thought those crazy people over there.
Well, they thought at some point 2 + 2 has to equal 4, right? And you can't. You can't impose new ways of knowing on that, but apparently you can.
So if we go back to that, if we go back to interpreting the humanities or interpreting culture, and rediscovering a hermeneutic or way of interpreting that is better than how critical social justice through postmodernism kind of metastasized into critical social justice, maybe through the arts and humanities and better understanding those, we can find another counter rather than just rational debate, which doesn't seem to work in all cases.
Well, it doesn't work with them, but
Exactly.
You've got to remember they are such a minority. It's. I mean, the recent study that was undertaken in the UK, and it might be different in America, of course, but the recent study here by the More in Common initiative found that only 13% of the population could be put into that bracket of I suppose, the woke supporters of the critical social justice ideology, which means that they're a minority in every single generation. It's just that they tend to occupy positions of power, so they're very powerful minority. But you can circumvent them because they are the minority. There are ways of doing that. It's harder when it comes to those when they're occupying so many powerful positions. But just because they are not adept or capable of rational debate doesn't mean that we jettison rational debate. That doesn't follow.
That's fair. That's fair, but it doesn't seem like rational debate in and of itself is going to be enough. Even in your book, you talk about comedy and you talk about art.
Yeah.
So how do we get back to a comedy and an art that would be counter-revolutionary?
Well, it comes back to the same thing of being braver. So when creative people just go back to creating the art they want to create and not have it policed by these people. We have a publishing industry where you regularly have sensitivity readers now monitoring your work. Do you have those in America?
Yeah, I think we started it.
You probably did. I mean, we've got most of this stuff from you. And that's effectively a censor. It's someone stepping in who has no understanding of what your artistic intention is or what. All they can see is, this is why they're so bad, aren't they, at understanding art and poetry and literature, and because they see every form of creative expression as being either a means to uphold privilege or a means to challenge it. That's all they can see. Whereas, and which means they're not qualified to read a book, or at least to talk about a book.
I was speaking with a librarian earlier in Washington State, and they're now selectively culling the libraries of offensive material. So in every rung, not only the publishers, but also the libraries are culling it. So,
it's really bad. I mean, there was a project here at Homerton College, Cambridge, where they were uploading their digital collection of children's books, but they were applying warnings to things like Little House on the Prairie and stuff like this. And when they were asked about it, they said, it is our role as we would be in dereliction of our duty. I might get this wrong, but we would be in dereliction of our duty as gatekeepers, not to keep harmful content from people. But they use the word gatekeepers, and their job is to be curators, not gatekeepers. They don't understand their own job, and this is why it's scary. When after the Salman Rushdie attack the other week, there was a prominent activist and lawyer online in the UK who got very frustrated about it. He was going on about how free speech is much more complicated than this. And actually, when we're talking about Salman Rushdie, we should think about are his books upholding privilege? Where does the power lie? How are you using your platform? That's all he can do. He can look at a book like the Satanic Verses, a fantastic piece of work, and all he can see is power structures. So he's not really reading the book, and that now is an attitude shared by prominent academics within English literature in higher education. So now the people who are ostensibly the most qualified to tell us about literature and talk about literature are actually the least qualified to do so. So that's a problem.
Well, it goes back to what you said, and earlier in your book, you say that you can't tell the difference between a 12-year-old whose phone privileges should be taken away and a sociology professor. Even people with a PhD in their title are acting like anime avatars too.
They really are, aren't they? Yeah. Have you had that? I mean, sometimes I've been really surprised. I've had, I get a lot of abuse online. Sometimes there's a really vicious one, really sort of truculent and childish. I think, and I click on it and it's like professor of something at Stanford. And you're like, oh my God. Yeah, it's really dispiriting, that kind of thing. How did the children get given these positions of power? It's odd. I mean, that's what happens when I suppose academics start to prioritize activism, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people are talking about alternative institutions. It seems like the network that you work for is kind of an instance of an alternative institution. Would you guys?
Well, yeah. Well, I've started working for GB News, and I have a show called Free Speech Nation on a Sunday, and I also host a show midweek called Headliners, which is where we go through the next day's papers. And the reaction to even the fact that a new broadcaster was being set up, the reaction online was insane. There were these activists 4 months before we'd aired anything, and they started talking about, GB News, they're setting up this far-right echo chamber channel, and this should be shut down. And they were bombarding advertisers with threats, that you shouldn't get involved in this, or we're going to expose you. And they just imagined, it was a kind of hysteria. They just imagined what this channel was. And then when it came on, and it wasn't what they thought it was going to be, they still doubled down and they still talk about it as being a far-right echo chamber. Mm-hmm. Whereas the channel has all sorts of opinions. It has people from the left, from the right. You hear everything. And the thing is, they don't like that. They don't like hearing all the views. I mean, ours, as far as I'm aware, is the only news channel that seriously tackles the issue of gender identity ideology. And I, on my show, go out of my way to get voices from all sides of that debate. It's hard, of course, to get the gender ideologues to appear on, because we go back to that thing. They don't want to debate. They don't
have you had success and gotten somebody on? Yeah,
just a couple. I mean, I had one really interesting debate between two trans people who had completely different views on the subject, and that was interesting.
Who were they?
But then I got a lot of anger from feminists about that because obviously these are two, because there's no biological women there. It's like, well, so you can never really win. But all you can do is week on, week out, try and get as many different voices on as possible. And but yeah, we are able to have those conversations, and the mainstream commentariat hate that. They hate the fact that we're doing it. They hate the fact that I will get a feminist on, like Helen Joyce or Julie Bindel or whoever, to talk about these issues openly and honestly, because the BBC aren't doing it. Sky News aren't doing it. That, because they are ideologically captured. So, but yeah, the reaction is utterly unhinged, and I think this will be something that happens continually. Whenever we try and set up a new institution or a new platform to push back against this, they're going to freak out. They do believe that certain opinions are harmful, and therefore they must be aired. I mean, what was that thing today? Did you see on Twitter the podcasting event? Did you see this?
No, what happened?
Okay, let me see if I can check this out. So, because I tweeted about it. So basically, there was, here we go, podcast movement at, what's it called? Oh, they blocked me. Oh, okay.
Always be screenshotting.
I did screenshot, actually, so that's fine. Let's have a look at this. If you've got the time, I'll show you what they said. Okay. Hi, so this is podcast movement at PM 22. So this is a big podcast event where they have lots of booths, with various podcasters. It says, "Hi, folks. We owe you an apology before sessions kick off for the day. Yesterday afternoon, Ben Shapiro briefly visited the PM22 Expo area near the Daily Wire booth. Though he was not registered or expected, we take full responsibility for the harm done by his presence." And then there's a big thread about how if anyone even catches a glimpse of Ben Shapiro, they will be literally erased. I can't believe they've blocked me. That's insane. I mean, I literally just checked now and they've blocked me. Why? What's going on? Unless they've protected their tweets. Is that possible?
It'll say that you're blocked if you're blocked. If you click on it,
says you are unable to view this tweet because the account owner limits who can view their
you're probably
tweets.
Blocked. Yeah,
but that doesn't make any sense. I didn't comment on it.
You just retweeted.
Oh no, tweets are protected.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But they're getting a lot of flack. No, I quote tweeted them as Titania. They're getting a lot of flack, so they've protected their tweets. But look, that's an organization. It's got 64,000 followers. It's running these podcast booths. They agreed to let the Daily Wire have a booth because why not? They're a big podcast as well. And now they're apologizing because Ben Shapiro showed up. I mean, it's nuts, isn't it? The very idea that someone should come along with a conservative point of view.
So
what is the matter with them?
We decry cancel culture because it's been used as a weapon to shut up diverse voices, but the mob tactic works the other way around too. And you've been able to stir up a large amount of people to go after because you have a large follower base, and then you show them something particularly ridiculous from your point of view, and then they go and they dogpile. What do you think about that? Is there a moral question?
I've just quote tweeted a company, but podcast movement, whatever it is, I don't even know what it is, but it's obviously a big company. It's not an individual. It's not like I've got everyone on Titania's account to go after some guy, with like 12 followers. Like, I haven't done that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair that when public bodies make such an illiberal statement that they should be critiqued for that. I mean, is that not?
Well, no, I just wonder to what extent we can decry cancel culture or dog piles if that's just kind of the way that things work, right? It seems like
criticism isn't the same as cancel culture.
Okay, could you tease that out a little bit? Then?
Yeah, sure. So cancel culture is a method or a system of public humiliation and retribution against someone, typically for a very minor slight. So it's wildly disproportionate. And it's when you attempt to see someone basically unpersoned. Normally you target their employer, try and get them to lose their job. You libel them. You trash their reputation. You tell lies about them so that no one will want to associate with them. That's what cancel culture means. It's not criticizing someone for what they say. Because without that, we don't have the marketplace of ideas. And it's a weird thing. It's like with JK Rowling, the people who claim that cancel culture is a myth, they often say, well, all that's happening with JK Rowling is we're holding the powerful to account. You're allowed to criticize JK Rowling. She's one of the richest women in the world. Like, it's not cancel culture to criticize what she says and to disagree with what she says, even in robust and vehement ways. But when you are routinely sending death threats and rape threats and lying about her and defaming her online and contacting a publisher and trying to get them to drop her as though they ever would, then that's a different thing. JK Rowling is so successful, she can't be cancelled. So it's not going to work anyway. But someone like Gillian Phillip, who was a children's author in the UK, who simply tweeted in support of JK Rowling, was dropped by her publisher and agent, and she had to retrain as a truck driver. And she's now said that the haulage industry is much less misogynistic than the world of children's literature. So good for her. So
you mean a lorry?
Yeah, you know.
Okay. I just wanted to be inclusive of the British terms.
Oh, I see. Lorry is a word you don't use. Yeah. I see. I get it. Yeah.
Use truck.
You say it in this patronizing way. You think it's funny, don't you? You think it's cute.
I think, you guys have a lot of cute isms out there. You still have princes and princesses roaming the countryside doing weird things with their bodies. Yeah. Doing stuff like that.
So do you think that's a fair distinction that I've drawn?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just bringing up the fact that we are in a new era of mobs. I mean, just the snowball effect with things. So,
well, I kind of feel like, you do have to, if you've got a lot of followers on Twitter, and you're picking on someone and bullying them and attacking them, I think that there's something quite, you're free to do it, but there is something rather unpleasant about that. I always treat it like hecklers in a comedy club. Like, if I'm on stage in a comedy club, I won't just pick on someone on the front row and say, hey, look at you, you're ridiculous, and make a fool of them and humiliate them. I won't do that. That's mean. But if someone heckles, then it's sort of open season. If they go, then they've invited it. They've asked for it. So I treat Twitter the same. I'm not going to quote tweet some small account just to try and humiliate and make a fool of someone, no matter how stupid they are. But I will if they've called me a fascist. Yeah. Because I sort of think, okay, if you want to say something, if you want to libel me online, then maybe I'll respond. And actually, I feel a kind of obligation to, because I think the problem with a lot of this stuff is people don't stand up for themselves enough, when they're defamed. So I have a very clear. It's in my mind. It's very clear what the ethics of this is. I think.
Well, it's interesting. I did quote tweet a very small account because they were talking about masculine humor and how you're never supposed to punch down. What do you think about the punching up, punching down? You do briefly talk about it in your book. Is there a ethic to that, and where does it fall apart? Because I think that if we can only ever punch up, then everybody can only hit God, and only midgets can be comedians at that point, right? So.
Yeah, I guess.
Or sorry, pygmies, to quote.
Pygmies is the better phrase. Well, you don't know. People disagree on what is punching up and punching down. So there's that. So who's going to clear that mess up? You know, with Charlie Hebdo, of course, they were always punching up. They were attacking major religious ideology, but people said they were punching down and interpreted them as attacking minority Muslims in France. So, you know, where it depends on your perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it's very relativist then.
Yeah, and in comedy you can punch any which way. Like it's completely up to you. I mean, you know, the problem I guess is that we all know that the school bully will always say, "Oh, it was just a joke," and that's their get out clause. You know, so you can use humor to bully people, and you can use humor to be mean and
evade accountability. Yeah,
but comedians, you know, the art form of comedy, you have to have that freedom to extend it in any which way you want. I mean, I don't punch down. I've even in satirical terms, I've only ever gone after those who I perceive to have power, just because it would be sort of against my style, I think, to start. And even when comedians mock sensitive targets, they're not really punching down. You know, someone makes a joke about homeless people, some kind of joke. It doesn't mean that they're
Scottish, right?
Or whatever, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean that they seriously believe what they're saying. It's kind of a misunderstanding of what a comedian is and what the comedian does. It's like a theatricalized persona, isn't it? It's not.
And it goes back to the stupidity that's at the heart of this, the literalism that they take, the very narrow way of analyzing any cultural artifact. It's either going against or for.
Did you see Louis C.K.? Do you remember when that leaked audio happened, where they leaked a part of his set and he was talking about the school shootings in America, and the Independent, which is a newspaper in the UK, the headline was something like Louis C.K. mocks survivors of school shooting. Do they really think Louis C.K. is saying, "Ha, you idiot, you losers, look at you getting shot"? I mean, it's so infantile. Of course he wasn't. So, but you're right. It's that literal-minded interpret. Again, it goes back to what I was saying about the arts. Just as they can't read a Salman Rushdie novel and possibly comprehend it, they can't listen to a joke and comprehend it because they think it's a literal statement of opinions. I've heard people say comedians need to be censored because they're expressing bad opinions on stage. In fact, we just had a comedian cancelled at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Did you hear about this?
No, what happened? What did he say?
It's a comedian called Jerry Sadowitz, who's one of the most controversial comedians in the UK. And everyone knows he's one of the most controversial comedians. You go to his shows to be offended. That's part of the fun.
And you know what? I was looking for his set. I could not find his material on YouTube.
Never. I've seen him absolutely scream at someone in the audience for trying to film him. He's scary. So Jerry Sadowitz is a Scottish magician comedian who his whole show, he can scream for over an hour about all minority groups and how he hates them all. He'll use racial epithets. I remember him doing a 10-minute set about how disgusting gay people are and all the vile stuff they get up to. And while he's screaming and spitting all this bile, he's doing these incredible magic tricks, these sleight of hand card tricks. It's an incredible juxtaposition. And it's really funny. I've heard him say the most anti-Semitic things you will ever hear. He's Jewish. And that should give you a clue as to what he's doing here. It is a vile, vicious persona that is just brutally hilarious. He's an equal opportunities offender. He hates everyone and everything. Now, and if you go and he gets his penis out and he's vulgar and disgusting and all the rest of it, and it's exhilarating to watch. And if you go to see that and you're offended, then just fuck off, basically. It's so ridiculous. He couldn't have more warnings if he tried, right? He even put out a promo video before this Edinburgh run saying, "I'm going to be rude. I'm going to get my dick out. I'm going to do my fascist stick," like all of this stuff. The show was called Not For Anyone. The show that I saw a number of years ago was called Jerry Sadowitz, Comedian, Magician, Psychopath. You can't say that he's misleading his audience. And yet, so he did 2 nights, both sold out, massive venue. After the first night, there were complaints. The Pleasance, which is one of the big venues at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, then shut it down on the second, said you can't come back. And they put out a statement saying Jerry Sadowitz's performance doesn't align with our values. They said audience members were made to feel unsafe. They used the word. They're using all the woke language that we've taken from you lot in America. They were using all of that stuff. And again, they were saying they use the phrase, these kinds of opinions are not acceptable anymore. They're not opinions. They're jokes. They're not even jokes. They're a kind of, as I say, a theatricalized. There's no point in. I mean, I wrote an article about this for Unheard, and I made this point about, if you have a go at Jerry, if you're offended by Jerry Sadowitz and try and get him cancelled, that's like being offended by Macbeth's ruthless ambition. It doesn't make sense. You're being offended at a character. So anyway, so that happened, and this is an interesting moment though, because whereas we've had comedians have their shows cancelled before, there was an act called Roy Chubby Brown, very big in the UK, had his show at Sheffield ditched last year. Didn't seem to bother the comedy community because the comedians don't like him. They think he's an old reactionary. Jerry Sadowitz is respected by all the major comedians. He's really seen as a veteran and a really sort of important comedic figure in the industry. There's been a lot of silence from those comedians that I know are very respectful of him. And but this might be a turning point, maybe, potentially.
There's another aspect of this, and it kind of mimics, or it rhymes with cancel culture. So I think it was earlier this year, there was this, or maybe it was last year, time is warped for me, called the Family Sex Show at the Royal Bath. And it was this very sincere desire to teach children how to have sex. And they had all this information about different sexual acts that you could do. And they were really trying to help children to be comfortable with their bodies and let adults show them how to use their bodies and stuff like that. It was very groomy, and they got canceled because it came to light. But the same people who would cancel these offensive acts are also promoting things that are on the surface and in the depth, actually trying to corrupt youth, right? I
mean, we talked about this on Headliners, the show I host sometimes midweek, and there's another comedian called Leo Kearse who's often on the show. And he made the point that, you take the Jerry Sadowitz situation where, because he exposes his penis and because he screams offensive phrases, adults need to be protected from choosing to go and see that show. And yet when it came to the Family Sex Show, we're treating kids like adults. Yeah. So why are we treating the adults like kids and the kids like adults was his fundamental point. And that's exactly right.
What do you think about that? I mean, isn't that weird? Isn't that odd?
It's insane. It's one of those... It's one of those things that I actually can't get my head around. You might be able to help me, but I don't know why. They think that it's almost like they're suggesting that having boundaries for small children when it comes to adult sexuality is somehow reactionary and conservative and old-fashioned. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know where they've got that from. I don't know why. I mean, you hear the odd extremist online talking about how, the LGBTQIA plus community should start bringing in MAPs, minor attracted persons, pedophiles. And you sort of think, look, that's just some insane person online. And there's a couple of academics who have said stuff like that. But how is that caught on? I don't understand. You're going to have to help me with that.
It's just, maybe it's just part and parcel of the contradictions inherent in the ideology, if it is a coherent ideology. But the rise of drag queen story hour, for some reason, that is something that they want us to do. And then any sort of movement to protect children is called Don't Say Gay, or is construed as trying to erase homosexuality from curriculum, right? When it's just saying, no, we're not going to teach about, how to have anal sex when you're a 9 or 8-year-old, right?
Right. Well, these kids they're kids. They're not sexual. This is like...
they're all obsessing over it now. The fifth graders are now like exchanging their sexualities. Oh, I think I might be demisexual or asexual stuff. It's just
but they're just mimicking. They're just mimicking, aren't they? That's what kids do, So it's really sad. I mean, the drag queen thing I find utterly bizarre. I mean, I like drag shows. I've seen drag. I've got friends who are drag queens, and part of that genre is it's sexually subversive. It pushes things to the edge. I've seen some of the most revolting and yet exhilarating sexual adult performances from drag queens. You'd be very upset by them, I'm sure, Benjamin. But I would never...
Literally shaking right now. Just thinking.
I can see it. But I would never bring a child to those shows, and nor would the drag queens involved want children in those shows. So what I don't understand, I think it's perfectly possible for a drag queen to read a story to children in an entertaining, flamboyant way. Drag queens are good actors, and they would be quite good at that, I imagine. But they would have to anesthetize their art form to such a degree, make it completely non-sexual, take out all the things that are really fun about the genre, and just do this really banal thing. I don't know why they would want to do that. The only thing I can think of is that, because I don't think it's helpful saying that all the drag queens doing drag queen story hour are grooming kids. I don't think that's helpful either. I think but I don't understand why they would want to do that. I don't get it. Again, maybe you can help me with that. I just think it's, and I spoke to a drag queen friend of mine recently about this, and he said to me, yeah, I just think it's weird. It's just not something I'd want to do. It's not artistically interesting to sanitize your work in that way.
Okay. Well, either that or you don't sanitize it, and then you're pushing. If you don't, pushing the line, right?
Vice versa. And some haven't they? That's the problem. I know you see those video clips of some drag queens performing for kids, and they clearly haven't sanitized it, and it's just an adult sex show in front of children, and that's I think that's unforgivable. You know, and that doesn't make me a reactionary. He said very defensively.
Yeah, there is a tension though between an adult appreciation of the theatrical and the subversive, but still wanting to keep it contained. And it seems like it's inside out now. Like we have to protect the adults, and we have to normalize the adult behavior for children. Right? I'm
with you on this 100%. I think. Look, let's just accept that we socialize. There's a period of socialization in childhood in which you do protect children. And you know, they don't have free speech, and you know, they start swearing in class. You say, don't do that, right? But that's fine, because that's the period of socialization. Once you're an adult, you should be able to do whatever the hell you please. Say whatever you want, you know, within the law. Do whatever you please. But this need to infantilize adults. I don't want someone canceling a comedy show because they fear it might be bad for me. How dare they? I'll make the decision what's good and what's bad for me. I'll make the decision what I see.
But at the same time, earlier in the conversation, you said if you saw somebody screaming racial epithets on the street, you would be morally obligated to go and stop them or calm them down. Yeah, but if the street is different than the theater or the stage.
There's a difference between a theatrical performance to an audience who have paid to buy tickets and racist harassment. Yeah. Okay. There's a difference.
Well, and isn't it just busking? Isn't it just comedian? Like maybe he's just a comedian busking on the street. That's part of his act. He just gets on the street.
Maybe it's just avant-garde performance art on the street. Yeah, maybe. Well, in which case he can get on with it.
Okay.
That's not a form of performance art that I've ever seen.
I don't know.
I mean, that said, I've been shouted at. I've walked past Christian fundamentalist preachers screaming about people like me are going to burn in hell and everything like that. So I think let them get on with it. Because I've got the option to walk away, right? So I think if they were chasing me, screaming in my face, and they wouldn't let me go, well, then it crosses the line into harassment, and then it's a different thing. I mean, I think these are quite clear boundaries, and I don't think they're that difficult to discern.
Well, one. I know it's not clear cut, but it does seem like the pride movement is chasing us down the street. I know that like half of the crosswalks in your country are now the neo pride flag, right? You know, with the
so it's called the Progress Pride flag.
Yeah.
And it's so you know, you used to have the 6-stripe rainbow flag, and now you've got the chevrons, the trans colors, and the black and brown stripes to be racially inclusive, and the whole thing looks like a mess. It looks like a Jackson Pollock. And it's ugly, and it's weird, and it's not half of the road crossings, by the way. That just so you know, it's a few. Okay, a few overzealous councillors have spent a lot of money painting these ugly flags onto the zebra crossings, causing even though disability awareness groups have said this is really bad for people with autism and with certain issues.
Oh no!
Yeah,
they should come with epilepsy warnings.
Yeah, no, I'm not even joking. It's really bad for that. And guide dogs, they don't understand what's going on because they've been trained to cross at zebra crossings. Anyway, so it's just a big, expensive waste of time, and it's also signaling. Dogs. Sorry,
those transphobic dogs and horses.
Yeah, it's transphobic dogs. Yeah. Have you seen that clip of the horses trying to cross it, and they don't know what they're doing because I think there's something like they see the red as a hole in the ground. They're terrified of this. Yeah, Well, there we go.
But the whole pride thing is like chasing people down the street. I mean, we have an entire month, and
I know what you mean.
I think in your country, you guys keep on having pride weekends, like every weekend.
It's endless. I know what you mean.
Chasing us down the street.
Yeah, because you can't go during Pride Month. You try and go to a shop in London or a restaurant or anything, and without having this rainbow flag dangled in your face. You're right. It's not harassment, is it? It's not. I ultimately can choose not to go to those shops and whatever, right? But it just feels relentless and exhausting. I know exactly what you mean. It feels like they're chasing you down the street with this stuff. But in a sense they are, because it's in all the schools and because it's in all the public institutions, the libraries, everywhere you go. And so I do want it to be taken, toned down, pulled out. I think we should reject. I totally reject it now. I mistrust that flag now. I think it's a religious symbol, and I don't want anything to do with it. And if I see a pub flying it, I probably won't go into it, because I'll feel like it's not. It's also co-opted. You know, the rainbow flag, the gay flag, the pride flag with its 6 stripes. It was a simple design. It was effective. It connotes unity and joy, and everyone's welcome, right? And then they had to add black stripes and brown stripes because they didn't think it was sufficiently racially inclusive, as though the rainbow flag was a literal representation of the skin colors that are acceptable in the gay community. It's utterly ridiculous.
You guys are into your glitter. I'll tell you that much, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing wrong with a bit of glitter, you know?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with any of that. I just, it used to mean something. When I was a kid and I saw that rainbow flag on a pub, I knew that was, and I'm using the woke language here, but I knew it was safe. I could sit in that pub with my boyfriend and hold his hand, and it was, I wasn't going to get looks. I wasn't going to get people moving away from us, which happened in one restaurant, literally asking for a different table because they couldn't be nearer. You know, this is going back a long time. Yeah. But now it doesn't mean that now. Now they've taken over with this new flag, and it's, you know, it's very sad.
You brought up different people that get canceled and not get canceled, like JK Rowling and Gillian. Was it Gillian?
Gillian Phillip.
Phillip, yeah. How did you get through that? How did you not get canceled, or did you lean into it? What was your trick?
I didn't have a boss. There was nothing to fire me from. I mean, how could I be cancelled? I you know, because I was a school teacher. I mean, if I'd stuck at school teaching, I could definitely I would be in a lot of trouble now as a school teacher, because I would be objecting to all this stuff. When they would make us do the unconscious bias training or the white privilege sessions, I would be very mouthy, and I'd make my objections very, very clear. Certainly wouldn't be promoted. I'd be one of those that, you know, would be a grunt in the department. You know, I'd never get anywhere. But then I left and I became a stand-up comedian, and I went into my own writing. And for years, I didn't have a boss. So who's going to fire me? And now I work for GB News. And the whole point of GB News is to broaden the conversation. Mm-hmm. They're not going to cancel me.
You're a headliner, right?
Well, I'm on the show Headliners.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but you were one of the original people when it started up, right?
Yeah.
So
they're not going to, you know. So I've never. I haven't been in that position where I could be cancelled. I mean, I suppose it could conceivably happen.
It happens every day, I guess, in minor ways. People come after you. People are.
But that's not cancellation. Again, the people shouting abuse at me online and doing all that. That's not. I'm not being cancelled, because I don't have to listen to that. I just block them and move on. It's you know, they're free to do it. They're free to scream in their little vacuum. I hope they enjoy it. I hope they get a lot out of it.
You brought up like the white privilege seminars and unconscious biases that are being taught in the education system. Isn't that weird? Because aren't white people indigenous to your land? So aren't the indigenous ways of knowing supposed to be important and fostered? But you guys have
now. You know full well that whiteness is the original sin. So you can't pull this indigenous stuff.
No,
you know how this works.
You guys are indigenous to your land. Do you feel a tie to that? Do you feel a tie to Britain, and or are you more cosmopolitan?
To my skin color?
No, to your land, to your home. I guess not your skin color, but your ethnicity. Maybe are you proud of being British? Do you think that it should be preserved? Do you think Britishness should be preserved? And
I'm probably the wrong person to ask about that. I've never felt a nationalism, a tie to anywhere. I think where you're born is arbitrary, and I do think the nation state is really important for democracy, for empowering working class people, for having for having accountability, and all of those things is very important. This is why I voted to get out of the EU, because I don't want unelected bureaucrats from abroad making decisions that affect us when we can't vote them out of office. I think that's terrible. So on that sense, but I don't have that patriotism that some people have. I understand it, and I've spoken to people who do feel that way, and I think that's fine. And I think it can be a very powerful and positive thing. I just don't. It's not innate with me. I don't feel that.
English literature, though, would be
that's a love of literature. That's a different thing.
English, or specifically British literature, or just literature.
That's my mother tongue, though. I mean, I might develop a similar love for French literature if I could read the stuff.
Okay, yeah,
it's as simple as that. Do you feel an innate pride in your Americanism?
I think that I think there's something beneficial and positive about having ties to locality, and that the cosmopolitan, hyper liberal way of thought, where we're just thinking in universalist terms, doesn't really work to actually tie community together. And
no, exactly. That's similar to what I was saying about the need for the nation state.
Yeah.
And for communal ties, absolutely. All of that stuff is important. But that doesn't mean that you're not necessarily welcoming of people from other communities. That doesn't necessarily...
I can shift. I can tone switch and stuff like that. But at the same time, with migrants coming in or being let in huge waves, that has negative implications and impacts on...
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, wage depression, that kind of thing. Yeah, of course. No, I understand that. There are arguments there. But of course, all of those arguments are reduced to, racist. People just say, well, anyone who has any kind of qualms about immigration must be a racist. And of course, that's hugely unhelpful, isn't it?
Can I ask you something? You pricked me at the end.
Well, I've upset you.
I wasn't upset, but I'm like, what is he talking about? On page 298. Maybe.
Okay. I'm gonna. It's in. I just consult this. 298. What are you going to say?
It's the epilogue. You said, critical social justice is every bit as mirthless as the Christianity it has usurped.
Yeah.
So you think Christianity is mirthless?
What's Jesus's best joke? Let's hear it.
Oh, he's hilarious. Have you read Luke? He is hilarious. He's a sarcastic master. Just the way that he breaks people's highfalutin manners down, the way that he goes after the Pharisees and the hypocrites. He's so subtle. He's such he's an excellent...
No, look, I don't think he's funny at all, but I don't think he's meant to be, and I don't want him to be. I don't want the Savior to be funny, right? But look, it is pretty mirthless. You've got to remember as well that I went to a convent school. I was... I was at church every week, and the nuns were pretty mirthless. There's an austerity about it. I've learned to appreciate it. Like now, when I go to mass now, I go for the austerity. I like that. Huh. I don't want I don't like it when there's the homily and the priest starts cracking jokes. I'm like, no.
Okay,
don't do that. Right. I'm not saying that Christians are without mirth. I think that's how you've interpreted it. That's not what I'm saying.
You said critical social justice is every bit as mirthless as the Christianity it's replaced. I think there's a lot of joy in Christianity, just from my own point of view. And
yes, I think there is as well. I don't think that's what I was saying. I was talking specifically about there are no jokes in the Bible.
The Bible's not funny? There's some funny stuff in there. You should read Genesis.
There is, but it's inadvertent. Like, the Elisha and the bears is a really funny story, but I don't think we're meant to find it funny.
Elisha and the bears? Is that when Elijah? Yeah, he gets made fun of by a bunch of kids for being bald, and then he has a mother bear tear him to pieces.
And then God gets his bear to tear these 40 children to pieces. Right? It's such an overreaction. But the thing is, because all they've done is call him bold, and that's mean, but you don't tear them to pieces with a bear. That's not proportionate response. So that is funny,
Okay.
But it's not meant to be funny, let's face it.
Okay, I don't know. But
I think you're reading too much into that. I think I didn't say it was without joy. I specifically did. If I'd have said joyless, I think you would be onto something. Okay. I would retract that. Okay. But I didn't say joyless because I don't believe it is joyless.
Yeah. You also write, part of the appeal of critical social justice is that it reframes differences of opinion as moral questions. And I really thought about that and the way that we always have to use morality to frame differences of opinion. Something's bad or something's good, right? And maybe not morality, like you said earlier. Some systems are better than others, and you're gonna say that some moralities are better than others. So
no, I think. Okay, what I mean by that is, for instance, if you and I have a different perspective on what would be the best way out of the cost of living crisis, what would it be? Would it be tax cuts? Whatever. We would have different perspectives. At the moment, there's a Tory leadership contest going on between two people, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, who have different views on the best way to tackle the rising inflation and the cost of living crisis. When I say that, when you reframe a difference of opinion like that and say Liz Truss, her approach is good and Rishi Sunak's approach is evil, that's what I mean. Mm-hmm. It's not. Neither is good or evil. Mm-hmm. It's that, in fact, both of them are trying to get us out of a problem. Yeah. So I'm talking about the tendency to reduce differences of opinion to the binary of good versus evil, to make it a moral question rather than a discussion. And it's a very Disneyfied view of the world. It's heroes and villains, goodies and baddies. And I don't think that's true. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You also follow it up by making a very insightful comment how that's how everybody agrees really quickly in this movement, in the critical social justice movement, because it's framed as good.
Exactly. So what they do is they say, we're on the side of the angels, so you can choose to disagree with us, but then you're a fascist and you're an evil person. So who's going to agree with that? That's how it's been so successful. That and the kind of intimidating tactics, Yeah.
So this book is out on September 13th, is it, or September 14th?
I think so. I think it's September the 8th in the UK, September 13th in America, I believe.
Okay. Are you guys still in lockdown, or do you get to roam freely and do book tours?
We are totally free. We are totally free to go wherever we go. We don't have to wear masks. We are. No, I'm going to be doing a live event on the 8th in London, which is going to be a discussion with Freddie Sayers from Unheard magazine, and we're going to talk about the book, and that will be quite fun. I might do another couple of events later on about the book and talk about it with people and meet people. I'd like to have the discussions. I think that's it's always good to. I mean, look, I've put all these ideas out there, and it'd be nice if people come back and disagree. I might get lots of people shouting at me because I said Christianity was mirthless. Maybe that's going to be that'll be the thing. And it's fine if you disagree with me on that. That's just a personal opinion.
Yeah. I thought that was sad because there's just so much mirth there. I don't know.
What do you mean by mirth? Yeah. I mean, I think there's a difference between joy and mirth.
Yeah. And I just, as I'm growing and changing, I find a pull to mass. There's something beautiful in there and joyful in there. And I guess I don't want a bunch of pastor jokes. I grew up in Protestantism where you have to put up with pastor jokes, which are like lame dad jokes. There's like dad jokes. They're even worse. But I understand that. And then I also understand your upbringing with the nuns. I never got the ruler slapping, and maybe I've been much better vocabulary if I had been slapped as much.
Yeah, it would have been good for you.
Wrapped across.
I got the slipper from a nun.
The slipper? She took off her is that like a English undergarment and she whipped you with it?
It's footwear.
Oh, okay.
Do you not know what a slipper is?
I just want to
it's a shoe. It's a soft shoe, but it didn't feel that soft to me. And she thrashed me with it for a long time, or it felt like a long time.
What did you do?
I'd broken a window.
With what?
My fist.
Another student? Oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I punched it.
Were you in a particularly mirthless mood at that point?
I was in a mirthless mood. I was I was 4 years old, and I had stayed behind after class to help tidy up the board games, and these kids outside were teasing me through the window, So I hit the window. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. I think I was just knocking at it to sort of get them to go away. And it broke, and I cut my hand. And I went crying to the teacher saying I've cut my hand. I know what it was. I said to the teacher I'd fallen over in the playground because I didn't want to admit that I'd broken the window, and that's why I got the injury. And I was punished for that. Not immediately, but I think it was about a week later that I got called to Sister Hilda's office, which was always a terrifying thing because she was I was only small, but she was a big, broad-shouldered nun who ran the school, and she hit me with a slipper. Never forgiven her for that.
Oh, yeah, no.
I mean, I'm sure she
let you heal. At least you weren't profusely bleeding when she whipped you.
No, there is that. There is that. But I don't think it was breaking the window that I think it was. Look, I think it was the lying. But maybe, if I go back now, maybe she was in the right. Maybe I needed that. I don't know. I never broke a window again.
There you go. Yeah.
So, there's something to that. Did you never have that kind of punishment at school?
No, I got some corporal punishment from my father back in the day. Yeah. We did.
Character building, right?
Yeah. My spine is much more rigid now. For being subjected to that. So art, rationality. One last question or one last topic. What's the role of religion in shoring up society against the encroachment of the new Puritans or this other religion? Is there a counter-revolutionary aspect that's still beneficial for society and religion? That
are you asking about religion or art here?
No, religion. I think we've spoken about art, we've spoken about humor, we've spoken about rationality, but what about religion?
You're asking if there's a role in that a religion has to play.
I mean, would you admit on camera that there's something positive to religion to shore us up against this?
I don't know why you think that's such a gotcha.
No, it's not a gotcha. Some people don't like talking about that.
There's all sorts of positive things for religion. All sorts. I mean, deeply devout religious people tend to be quite nice. Because they,
albeit mirthless, they are nice though.
They're not very mirthful, but they are but they are nice. I mean, there's all sorts of positive. I don't think though religion is necessarily the way to counter the woke movement, simply because the woke movement has taken the form of a kind of secular religion. I don't think that's necessarily. I don't think you need any particular faith. I think people of all faiths and none have a vested interest in resisting this stuff. Don't you think? I mean, I don't think, but I have no, was your concern in the book that it felt like by comparing the social justice movement to a religion, I was in some way denigrating religion?
I did take issue with it at the beginning, but then you clarified that by New Puritanism, you were speaking about particular set of behaviors. You weren't calling all Puritans this, and fundamentalism. And
I think I've been quite clear about that in the book. I've had a lot of tweets of people offended because they think I'm insulting the Puritans, and it's actually the opposite when you read what I'm actually saying about that. Yeah. So
I'm just curious because it seems like social justice, critical social justice, wokeness is taking the place of religion because there was no religion there.
I see what you mean. Sorry, I didn't
reinvigorated to a religious framework because it's been missing.
I totally get what you mean. I hadn't picked up what you meant there. Yes, I understand. It's an interesting question. I think there is something to that. I mean, I think it is the case, isn't it, that it has. This is something I feel completely unqualified to talk about, though. The extent to which has this movement arisen because of the decline of religion? I feel like that's beyond my expertise. I don't know, but I'm very interested to know whether there is a correlation there. It might be related to that deeper need for meaning that we all have, and in a world which has rejected God, maybe this ideology gives us meaning. It certainly seems to give its adherents a sense of meaning and purpose, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. They spend all their time. I mean, they're monomaniacs. They obsess with this stuff, and they are engaged in rooting out sin and rooting out heresy. I mean, it must have the same exhilaration that an inquisitor would have got. I imagine it's that same kind of feeling. When it satisfies that awful human potential for cruelty and excuses it and turns it into a virtue. So I imagine that is quite satisfying. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'm basically answering your question by saying I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm interested to know the answer to that question.
Have you found maybe this? I just feel like this is too personal. Maybe this is a British American thing, but I feel like have you found as you grow up and kind of go through different processes of maturation, have you found a place for religion, a place for humor, a place for all these other cultural things, and to fill out your life? You say you go to mass. I'm wondering, does that kind of
very rarely? Okay. Very rarely. I'm a lapsed Catholic.
Lapsed. Okay.
Yeah.
You just keep on lapsing. Absolutely. Is that like a morning? Every morning.
You keep on lapsing. It's no. I mean, no. I very rarely. But when I have been, I have enjoyed it. I don't. I suppose you're asking about the search for meaning, the search for purpose.
Liberalism is a good framework for interacting with people we disagree with, but it doesn't inherently have a meaning or a hierarchy of belief.
No,
we have to discover that for ourselves.
I mean, I get that from reading, from art, from my relationships with those close to me, from my work. I feel like I am in a very lucky position. I do feel that I have a sense of purpose. And I have a relatively enjoyable life. So I mean, I think, and so I already have an advantage that a lot of people don't have. So I'm very grateful for that. I don't go out of my way and search for meaning or trying to find myself or anything like that.
Are you done with that, or you were never inclined to do that?
I am who I am.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did this to me last time. You were trying to sort of psychoanalyze me, and you put me on the spot. It's your thing, isn't it?
I want the inside Andrew Doyle.
I don't think you're going to get it.
Just a glimpse.
I think you accused me last time of being that I was concealing, or that I don't share much, something like that.
Did I?
Yeah, you were basically saying I have a guard and I don't let it down.
Well, not that you're being evasive right now.
Yeah, but the thing is, we've never actually met in person.
No, we haven't.
We've only ever met over podcasts.
Yeah.
And I feel like that has been a barrier to the intimacy that you crave. I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know, but maybe you're good at turning the psychoanalyst turn here. No, I'm not. You're on the couch now.
I'm just saying, you should maybe reflect on that.
I will. I'll meditate.
What is this need
deeply
to sort of probe into people's psyche? Where does that come from? Do you think?
Curiosity?
That doesn't cut it, does it?
Storytelling? This is a literary endeavor for me. Podcasting is the human experience. That's the kernel. That's the nut. Like all these opinions.
Is that right? So is this where you get your purpose from, or your sense of meanings from asking invasive questions of strangers? That might be your thing.
No, I don't know. You put it that way. It is kind of overstepping. A lot of people actually come to me to bare their soul, but other people don't. Yeah.
But I think I've been pretty honest.
No, I'm not accusing.
I haven't lied to you.
No. I knew there was a line in the sand, and I crossed it. So I'll retreat. I'll retreat. Yeah.
No, you're nowhere near it. Actually,
I just wanted to know Andrew Doyle's search for meaning. That was just my.
I don't know. I don't think you're anywhere near any kind of line. But I don't think I don't know what I could reveal to you that would make that would satisfy your curiosity.
No. I was specifically asking about the role that God has, or religious thinking has, in not just in your life, but encountering this new Puritanism, as you call it, this critical social justice. And
well, I mean, I think my ethical framework has come from my religious background, probably, and I think. There's a lot to be gained from the Christian ethos, loving your neighbor as you love yourself. I think there's all sorts of, I think it's a wonderful way to live. it feels innate to me, but maybe it's something that came from when I was socialized by nuns. So maybe.
With slippers.
Are you religious, Benjamin? I didn't know you were.
I would like to be, but I keep on lapsing, as you put it.
Okay. Yeah.
So
most Catholics are lapsed, though. You're not Catholic, are you? You're Protestant.
No. Yeah, I grew up Protestant. I'm just enamored by that level of discourse. I just think I've done the race thing, and it's boring me. Gender is much more interesting to me because there's so many facets to it, and there's a lot of craziness that ties it to the current event. But underneath it is like some sort of deeper understanding about what ties culture together and religion to that.
Do you ever get bored of the culture war stuff and talking about it? Because, I mean, inevitably, a lot of your guests will want to talk about this stuff. Does it?
I'm able to, by centering the personal, to kind of like let the political not be constantly invading every aspect of it, but watching how the political has corrupted the personal is kind of a theme in my...
But it's been forced onto us. It's a bit like what you were saying about the rainbow flags. It's like the fact that I can't watch a Netflix series now without someone preaching at me about some of this stuff. It is kind of inescapable, which is also why I have to write about it, because I want it to go away.
Purge. Yeah.
Let's just get away. You know, I'm hoping that I don't ever have to write another book about this stuff. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Okay. So what about artistically? You do musicals and stuff. Are you pining to get back to that, or are you pretty satisfied in your output right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the pandemic put everything on hold. Yeah. And then, last time I spoke to you, I was working on 2 musicals. One of them was on in Belfast last month. Finally got there, but that was 2 years after it was meant to be on. The other musical, which I've been developing for many years, I've told you about, I'm pretty sure, is the musical about the plastic surgery in World War II. And there was a pioneering plastic surgeon called Archibald McIndoe, who basically, these RAF pilots would come back with their entire faces burnt away, just horrible injuries. And because of the development of plasma technology, they were surviving that. Whereas, of course, before they weren't surviving. Suddenly, you had all these people with permanent facial disfigurements living. And so he pioneered this, their whole identities erased. And he pioneered this new technology to recreate their faces, and they were called the Guinea Pig Club. Everyone who went through his surgery became a member of the Guinea Pig Club because it was experimental. And it was this hospital in East Grinstead where I used to live, and I was really fascinated by this story. And the musician who I collaborate with had heard one of the guinea pigs. I mean, I think there's not many of them still surviving, because I think the youngest, last time I checked, the youngest was sort of 92 years old. They used to meet annually every year for up until about 8 years ago. And he was talking about how Archibald McIndoe used to play the piano on the ward, and they used to sing. I mean, part of his whole philosophy was not just physical healing, it was psychological healing. And this was really radical at the time. He would get people to go out to the local pubs. These people with huge disfigurements midway through the treatment, with pedicle grafts coming off their face and all sorts of stuff. And they would interact with the local community, go to the pub. And the town, East Grinstead, became known as the town that doesn't stare, because these people could be part of it again and part of a community again. And so, and he allowed them to have beer on the ward. He only hired pretty attractive nurses. He allowed them to wear their own clothes. They didn't have military. They didn't observe military rank. All these incredibly unorthodox things that went on just on this ward, and it enabled them to become human again. To regain their humanity. It is an incredible story, and we've written the musical. It's done, and we're hoping now that the pandemic's over, we can take it to the next stage. I hope.
There's a I don't know, not to interpret it according to present day, but it does seem like that act of tolerance, or that ability to tolerate the ugly or the disfigured, and to see the human inside is really important practice that is kind of lost right now, or even anti-woke. We're always like yelling at the the purple-haired teachers who are doing crazy things, which is right, but it's like we're staring at the freaks, right, in a way.
But we're more concerned about their behavior, aren't they? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we could all be friends with people with bright purple hair. It wouldn't bother any of us really. It's just that that when you see those libs of TikTok videos, there's a certain look that seems to accompany this very hectoring, entitled and narcissistic behavior, isn't there? And I don't think it's about people, you know, denigrating someone because of their physical appearance.
No,
I don't think that's what it really is.
No, but insofar as they are broken people trying to, you know, fix the world or whatever, there is a way of looking at them. There's a way of laughing at them. There's a way of speaking at them. But there's just a way of looking at them. Like I remember when I would I worked in preschool for a while, and a kid would get hurt, like scrape their knee or something like that, and they'd be so wrapped up in feeling their pain that I could sympathize with their pain, but that would amplify their pain. But if I just recognized them in pain, then they would recognize their pain as something they were experiencing rather than something they were possessed by. And there was just a way that I could pay attention to them, to shepherd them through that. And I think that could possibly be another way of waking the woke out of their sleepwalking.
So in other words, you're suggesting maybe we shouldn't take such an aggressive stance towards them.
I think that
bring them on board.
There could be also a tool of being the adult in the room.
But that's what I support as well.
A pastor, as well as.
I mean, I'm always civil to I invite them on my show all the time.
You're good at that, yeah.
They just never do. They never want to. Of all the people, by the way, I mean, like, you know, my interviewing style. I'm not combative at all, even if I don't agree.
I can't see you being combative. Have you ever like actually had to be combative? Like, no, this isn't going to fly.
Because I will challenge and disagree.
Yeah.
But you can do that without being rude.
Yeah.
You do it to me all the time. You know.
Yeah.
You haven't done the thing of saying, you said that Christians were mirthless. How dare you? Well, you didn't do that.
No.
So you almost did.
No,
you attempted to.
It just,
by the way, maybe that sentence is wrong. Maybe I should rewrite that for the paperback.
I don't know. I wanted to bring it up because it was just interesting. Because
sometimes as well, that when you write a book, you are just putting down your feelings about something and putting it out there, and it doesn't mean it's definitive. You know, it doesn't mean that. I think. Because obviously, when you're writing a book of this kind, you are presenting an argument, aren't you? So it will be framed and expressed in tones that sound as though you are dead certain, because you're presenting an argument. But I'm always very aware that I'm going to be wrong about a lot of stuff, and I'm more than happy to have people come back at me and say you're wrong about this and this is why, and I'll probably be persuaded on some of those occasions. I think that's fine. I think that's okay. I'm not frightened of that.
No, it actually, we need more of that. We need more frank speaking, and then, allow the author to change. We have a very narrow idea about what an artist or an author is. Like, this is something they said and it stains their whole character, when it's just actually a human being being a human being at a particular point in time and space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Any other questions, Benjamin?
No. Andrew Doyle, thank you so much. It's been, I looked it up, December 11th, 2020, so it was after the Great Awakening, the last time we saw it.
Oh, okay.
Almost 2 years, but...
yes, but I think it was a Christmas. We recorded it at Christmas, so I think we were just being quite frivolous.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really a
full
serious
of mirth,
podcast.
like those Christians. They have a whole month of mirth.
Yeah, but because there was a Christmas tree behind me, and it was about... So that's a pagan thing, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
A lot of mirth in paganism.
Yeah, and froth on their beer. Yeah,
I think maybe it's because I associate mirth with sex, and I think the Catholic attitude to sex has always been quite mirthless.
Behind lock and key, yeah.
Because it's about procreation. In fact, the Catechism of the Catholic Church says explicitly that sex without procreation is abominable. Without the potential for procreation is abominable.
Oh, okay.
Which rules out most of my favorite things. I don't mean that.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. Andrew Doyle, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.